The prehistoric period is the oldest part of Cypriot history. This article covers the period 10,000 to 800 BCE and ends immediately before written records of civilizations, such as the first mention of Cyprus by the Romans. Epipaleolithic. Cyprus was not settled in the Paleolithic, which allowed survival of numerous dwarf forms, such as dwarf elephants and pygmy hippos, well into the Holocene. These animals are thought to have arrived on the island as a result of being swept out to sea while swimming off the coast of the nearby mainland. There are claims of an association of this fauna with artifacts of Epipaleolithic forages at Kremnos near Limassol on the southern coast of Cyprus. The extinction of the pygmy hippos and dwarf elephants has been linked to the earliest arrival of Homo sapiens on Cyprus. There is evidence of this because of the piles of burned bones in the camps occupied by these early humans in caves on the southernmost point on the island. Neolithic. Aceramic Neolithic. The oldest evidence of Neolithic settlement is dated to 8800–8600 BC. The first settlers were already agriculturalists but did not yet produce pottery. They introduced the dog, sheep, goats and maybe cattle and pigs, as well as numerous wild animals like foxes and Persian fallow deer that were previously unknown on the island. The PPNB settlers built round houses with floors made of terrazzo of burned lime and cultivated einkorn and emmer. Pig, sheep, goat and cattle were kept, but remained morphologically wild. Evidence for cattle is rare, and when they apparently died out in the course of the 8th millennium, they were not reintroduced until the early Bronze Age. In the 6th millennium BC, the Aceramic Quirocoetia culture was characterized by round houses, stone vessels and an economy based on sheep, goats and pigs. The daily life of the people in those Neolithic villages was spent in farming, hunting, animal husbandry and the lithic industry, while homesteaders were engaged in spindling and weaving cloths, in addition to the probable participation in other activities. The lithic industry was the most individual feature of this Aceramic culture, and innumerable stone vessels made of grey andesite have been discovered during excavations. The houses had a foundation of river pebbles. The remainder of the building was constructed in mud brick. Sometimes several round houses were joined together to form a kind of compound. Some of these houses reach a diameter of up to 10 meters. Inhumation burials are located inside the houses. Water wells discovered by archaeologists in western Cyprus believed to be among the oldest in the world, dated at 9,000 to 10,500 years old, putting them in the Stone Age. They are said to show the sophistication of early settlers, and the heightened appreciation for the environment. Plant remains indicate the cultivation of cereals, lentils, beans, peas and a kind of plum called bulis. Remains of the following animal species were recovered during excavations: Persian fallow deer, goat, sheep, mouflon and pig. More remains indicate red deer, roe deer, a kind of horse and a kind of dog, but no cattle as yet. Life expectancy seems to have been short. The average age at death appears to have been about 34 years, and there was a high infant mortality rate. In 2004, the remains of an 8-month-old cat were discovered buried with its human owner at a Neolithic archaeological site in Cyprus. The grave is estimated to be 9,500 years old, predating Egyptian civilization and pushing back the earliest known feline-human associations significantly. Ceramic Neolithic. The Aceramic civilization of Cyprus came to an end quite abruptly around 6000 BC. It was probably followed by a vacuum of almost 1,500 years until around 4500 BC, when one sees the emergence of Neolithic II. At this time, newcomers arrived in Cyprus, introducing a new Neolithic era. The main settlement that embodies most of the characteristics of the period is Soti Sotira near the south coast of Cyprus. The following ceramic Sotira phase has monochrome vessels with combed decoration. It had nearly 50 houses, usually having a single room that had its own hearth, benches, platforms and partitions that provided working places. The houses were on the main freestanding, with relatively thin walls and tended to be square with rounded corners. The sub-rectangular houses had 2 or 3 rooms. In Kirikisha, the remains of the Sotira phase overlay the aceramic remains. There are Sotira ceramics in the earliest levels of Erimi as well. In the north of the island, the ceramic levels of Truli may be synchronous with Sotira in the south. The late Neolithic is characterized by a red-on-white ware. The late Neolithic settlement of Kalavassos Pambouls has sunken houses. Charga Lithic. The Neolithic culture was destroyed by an earthquake c. 3800 BC. In the society that emerged, there are no overt signs of newcomers but signs of continuity. Therefore, despite the violent natural catastrophe, there is an internal evolution that is formalized around 3500 BC with appearance of the first metalwork and the beginning of the Charga Lithic period that lasted until about 2500 and 2300 BC. Very few chisels, hooks and jewelry of pure copper have survived, but in one example there is a minimal presence of tin, something which may support contact with Asia Minor, where copper working was established earlier. During the Charga Lithic period, changes of major importance took place along with technological and artistic achievements, especially towards its end. The presence of a stamp seal and the size of the houses that was not uniform, both hint at property rights and social hierarchy. The same story is supported by the burials because some of them were deposited in pits without grave goods and some in shaft graves with relatively rich furniture, both being indications of wealth accumulation by certain families and social differentiation. The Neolithic Charga Lithic period is divided into the Erimi and Iaios Georgios phases. The type site of the Neolithic I period is Erimi on the south coast of the island. The ceramic is characterized by red-on-white pottery with linear and floral designs. Stone and clay figurines with spread arms are common. In Erimi, a copper chisel has been found. This is the oldest copper find in Cyprus so far. Otherwise, copper is still rare. Another important Charga Lithic site is Lempa. The Charga Lithic period did not come to an end at the same time throughout Cyprus, and lingered in the Paphos area until the arrival of the Bronze Age. Bronze Age. Early Bronze Age. The new era was introduced by people from Anatolia who came to Cyprus about 2400 BC. The newcomers are identified archaeologically because of a distinct material culture known as the Philia culture. This was the earliest manifestation of the Bronze Age. Philia sites are found in most parts of the island. As the newcomers knew how to work with copper, they soon moved to the so-called copper belt of the island, that is the foothills of the Troodos Mountains. This movement reflects the increased interest in the raw material that was going to be so closely connected with Cyprus for several centuries. Afterwards, the Philia phase of the Bronze Age saw a rapid transformation of technology and economy. Rectilinear buildings made of mud brick, the plough, the warp-weighted loom and clay pot stands are among the characteristic introductions. Cattle were reintroduced, together with the donkey. The succeeding early Bronze Age is divided into 3 general phases, a continuous process of development and population increase. Marchialonia is the best excavated settlement of this period. Marchialonia and Sotira Cominoidea are excavated settlements. Many cemeteries are known, the most important of which is Belapis Vanus on the north coast. Middle Bronze Age. The Middle Bronze Age, which followed the Early Bronze Age, is a relatively short period and its earlier part is marked by peaceful development. The Middle Bronze Age is known from several excavated settlements: Marchialonia, Alhambra, Muts and Pyrgos Mavrouraki. These give evidence of economy and architecture of the period. From Alhambra and Marking in central Cyprus we know that the houses were rectangular with many rooms, with lanes allowing people to move freely in the community. At the end of the Middle Bronze Age, fortresses were built in various places, a clear indication of unrest, although its cause is uncertain. The most important cemeteries are at Belapis, Lapithos, Kalavassos and Denair. An extensive collection of Bronze Age pottery can be seen online from the cemeteries at Denair. The up to now oldest copper workshops have been excavated at Pyrgos Mavrouraki, 90 kilometers southwest of Nicosia. Cyprus was known as Alasia. The name is preserved in Egyptian, Hittite, Assyrian, Ugaritic documents. Late Bronze Age. The beginning of the Late Bronze Age does not differ from the closing years of the previous period. Unrest, tension and anxiety mark all these years, probably because of some sort of engagement with the Hyksos who ruled Egypt at this time but were expelled from there in the mid-16th century. Soon afterwards, peaceful conditions prevailed in the eastern Mediterranean that witnessed a flowering of trade relations and the growing of urban centers. Chief among them was Enkomi, the earliest predecessor of modern Famagusta, though several other harbor towns also sprung up along the southern coast of Cyprus. Around 1500 BC, Thutmose III claimed Cyprus and imposed a tax on the island. Literacy was introduced to Cyprus with the Cypro-Minoan syllabary, a derivation from Cretan Linear A. It was first used in early phases of the Late Bronze Age and continued in use for c. 400 years into the LCIIB, maybe up to the second half of the 11th century BC. It likely evolved into the Cypriot syllabary. The late Cypriot IIC was a time of local prosperity. Cities were rebuilt on a rectangular grid plan, like Enkomi, where the town gates now correspond to the grid axes and numerous grand buildings front the street system are newly founded. Great official buildings constructed from ashlar masonry point to increased social hierarchization and control. Some of these buildings contain facilities for processing and storing olive oil, like at Moroni Vorns and building X at Kalavassos Ieios Demetrios. Other ashlar buildings are known from Paliacastro. A sanctuary with a horned altar constructed from ashlar masonry has been found at Murtu Pygades. Other temples have been located at Enkomi, Kishon and Kouklia. Both the regular layout of the cities and the new masonry techniques find the closest parallels in Syria, especially in Ugarit. Rectangular corbelled tombs point to close contacts with Syria and Palestine as well. The practice of writing spread, and tablets in the Cypro-Minoan script have been found on the mainland as well. Ugaritic texts from Ras Shamra and Enkomi mention Ya, the Assyrian name of Cyprus, that thus seems to have been in use already in the Late Bronze Age. Cyprus was a part of the Hittite Empire but was a client state and as such was not invaded but rather merely part of the empire by association and governed by the ruling kings of Ugarit. As such, Cyprus was essentially left alone with little intervention in Cypriot affairs. However, during the reign of Tadali Uriv, the island was briefly invaded by the Hittites for either reasons of securing the copper resource or as a way of preventing piracy. Shortly afterwards the island was reconquered by his son Suppiluliuma around 1200 BCE. Some towns show traces of destruction at the end of LCIIC. If this is really an indication of a Mycenaean invasion has recently come under considerable doubt. Originally, two waves of destruction, c. 1230 BC by the Sea Peoples and 1190 BC by Aegean refugees, or 1190 and 1179 BC according to Paul Astrom had been proposed. Some smaller settlements were abandoned but do not show traces of destruction. The years of peace that brought about such a flowering of culture and civilization did not last. During these years, Cyprus reached unprecedented heights in prosperity, and it played a rather neutral role in the differences of her powerful neighbors. Rich finds from this period testify to a vivid commerce with other countries. We have jewelry and other precious objects from the Aegean along with pottery that prove the close connections of the two areas, though finds coming from Near Eastern countries are also plentiful. In the later phase of the Late Bronze Age, great amounts of Mycenaean IIIC 1B pottery were produced locally. New architectural features include Cyclopean walls, found on the Greek mainland as well, and a certain type of rectangular step capitals, endemic on Cyprus. Chamber tombs are given up in favor of shaft graves. Many scholars therefore believed that Cyprus was settled by Mycenaean Greeks by the end of the Bronze Age, but this view has increasingly been criticized in recent years, as there is no distinct break in most areas of material culture between the LCIIC and LCIII. Large amounts of IIIC 1B pottery are found in Palestine during this period as well. While this was formerly interpreted as evidence of an invasion, this is seen more and more as an indigenous development, triggered by increasing trade relations with Cyprus and Crete. There are finds that show close connections to Egypt as well. In Hala Sultan Tekke, Egyptian pottery has been found, among them wine jugs bearing the cartouche of Seti I and fish bones of the Nile perch. Another Greek invasion was believed to have taken place in the following century, indicated, among other things, by a new type of graves and Mycenaean influences in pottery decoration. Most authors claim that the Cypriot city kingdoms, first described in written sources in the 8th century BC, were already founded in the 11th century BC. Other scholars see a slow process of increasing social complexity between the 12th and the 8th centuries, based on a network of chiefdoms. In the 8th century, the number of settlements increases sharply, and monumental tombs, like the royal tombs of Salamis, appear for the first time. This could be a better indication for the appearance of the Cypriot kingdoms. This period shows the appearance large urban centers. Iron Age. The Iron Age follows the sub-Mycenaean period, a Late Bronze Age, and is divided into the geometric 1050 to 700 BC. Archaic 700–525 BC. In the ensuing Early Iron Age, Cyprus becomes predominantly Greek. Pottery shapes and decoration show a marked Aegean inspiration, although Oriental ideas creep in from time to time. Pottery types also appear from other Mediterranean cultures, as evidenced from archaeological recovery on Cyprus of pottery from Cydonia, a powerful urban center of ancient Crete. New burial customs with rock-cut chamber tombs having a long dromos, along with new religious beliefs, speak in favor of the arrival of people. For the Aegean, the same view is supported by the introduction of the safety pin that denotes a new fashion in dressing, and also by a name scratched on a bronze skewer from Paphos and dating between 1050 to 950 BC. Foundations myths documented by classical authors connect the foundation of numerous Cypriot towns with immigrant Greek heroes in the wake of the Trojan War. For example, Teucer, the brother of Aias, was supposed to have founded Salamis, and the Arcadian Agrippina of Tichaea to have replaced the native ruler Cinyras and to have founded Paphos. Some scholars see this a memory of a Greek colonization already in the 11th century. In the 11th century, tomb 49 from Paphos scales 3 bronze obloi with inscriptions in Cypriot syllabic script have been found, one of which bears the name of Opheltas. This is first indication of the use of Greek language on the island, although is written in the Cypriot syllabary that remained in use down to the 3rd century BC. Cremation as a burial rite is seen as a Greek introduction as well. The first cremation burial in bronze vessels has been found at Kourion Kalariziki, tomb 40, dated to the first half of the 11th century. The shaft grave contained 2 bronze rod tripod stands, the remains of a shield and a golden scepter as well. Formerly seen as the royal grave of first Argive founders of Kourion, it is now interpreted as the tomb of a native Cypriot or a Phoenician prince. The cloisonné enameling of the scepter hid with the 2 falcons surmounting it has no parallels in the Aegean, but shows a strong Egyptian influence. The evidence for Greek settlement is thus not very strong, but many Greek Cypriot archaeologists have consistently downplayed the Oriental influence. In the 8th century, numerous Phoenician colonies were founded, like Karkadasht, present-day Larnaca and Salamis. The oldest cemetery of Salamis has indeed produced children's burials in Canaanite jars, clear indication of Phoenician presence already in the LCIIB. Similar jar burials have been found in cemeteries in Kourion Kalariziki and Paleipophos Scales near Kouklea. In Scales, many Levantine imports and Cypriot imitations of Levantine forms have been found and point to a Phoenician expansion even before the end of the 11th century. The 8th century BC saw a marked increase of wealth in Cyprus. Communications to the east and west were on the ascent, and this created a prosperous society. Testifying to this wealth are the so-called royal tombs of Salamis, which, although plundered, produced a truly royal abundance of wealth. Sacrifices of horses, bronze tripods and huge cauldrons decorated with saurians, griffins etc. Chariots with all their ornamentation and the horses' gear, ivory beds and thrones exquisitely decorated were all deposited into the tombs, dromoi, for the sake of the masters. The late 8th century is the time of the spreading of the Homeric poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Funerary customs at Salamis and elsewhere were greatly influenced by these poems. The deceased were given skewers and firelogs in order to roast the meat, a practice found in contemporary Argos and Crete, recalling the similar gear of Achilles when he entertained other Greek heroes in his tent. Honey and oil, described by Homer as offerings to the dead, are also found at Salamis, and the flames of fire that consumed the deceased were quenched with wine as it happened to Patroclus's body after it was given to the flames. The heroes' ashes were gathered carefully, wrapped into a linen cloth and put into a golden urn. At Salamis the ashes of the deceased are also wrapped into a cloth and deposited into a bronze cauldron. Therefore, the Cypriots, along with their extravagant display of wealth that bears many Oriental features, do not forget their roots, for which they must have been very proud. The circulation of the Homeric poems must have revived the interest in their ancestors, whose system of government they never lost sight of. The prehistoric period came to an end with the writing of the first works that still survive, first by the Assyrians, then by Greeks and Romans.